Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to discuss books. And today we are going to be talking about all the things that I read in the month of March.
It's coffee time.
I hope you guys had a wonderful Easter holidays if you do celebrate. I spent basically almost a week with my parents, and every day I took them to a different city or to a different activity, and we were back home so exhausted and dead. So for the whole week that my parents were here, I didn't read at all, and it feels so weird when a week passes by and you have not read a single page. It just feels like a part of my personality has been temporarily disabled. I don't know, it just feels so weird, but you know, I'm happy that I spent some quality time with my parents, and I got to show them a lot of things that otherwise they might have not been able to see because my parents don't speak any other language other than Spanish. So for them, it's hard to travel by themselves. So anyway, I'm here to let you know everything that I read in March. I still managed somehow to read 11 things, even though a couple of these are really short, so it's kind of cheating, I guess. But anyways, I'm here to let you know my thoughts on the books. A lot of them are, in fact, documented in my last two reading vlogs. One of them was like spending a week in my life, so you guys know how my weeks generally go. I read a lot during that vlog, and also my Easter vlog that I hope you guys enjoyed as well. If you're new to the channel, welcome to our coffee times. I do like to rate the books with coffee mugs because let's be honest, by this point my blood type is coffee, and also I start with the lowest rating so that we always end up with the highest one on a positive note. Let's start with Pencils at Dawn by Larkin Shaw. This was a bad decision. Bad decisions were made that day. I remember we came back home from watching a movie in the cinema, and I wanted to read something quick before bed, and I wanted to read something that I could potentially finish the same night, and I was looking through my Kindle to see which short stories I had, and I had these rom-com enemies to lovers short story around 60 pages, and I'm like, you know what, let's add this to the mix, since in the month of March everything that I had on my TBR pile were like thrillers and horror books, and I did read this one, but like I said, it was a bad choice. You know, I love a good enemies to lovers story. It's one of those tropes that I do enjoy in romance books. Unfortunately, this one, you know, the main characters had zero chemistry. They were very bland characters, and it was very, very boring. It's basically a short story about two co-workers that are always fighting, and the boss decides to make them work together, of course, because the boss thinks, oh, they're gonna end up falling in love, so I'm gonna push them to work together and they will realize that they are perfect for each other. The character of the boss was super annoying, so it was just something that I could not believe, like not even in rom-coms where you have to be a little bit in disbelief. Like this was really pushing it. It just made no sense. It was just so unrealistic overall. And like I said, the main characters had no chemistry. It was just boring and nonsensical. So sadly, this was not for me. Next we have Found Deb by Natalie D. Richards, and this is a YA thriller, and we follow a group of co-workers that are working the last shift at a movie theater, and they all get locked up at a shopping mall, and there's a killer on the loose. So based on that premise, you would assume that I would really, really love this book, but I feel like this book might have been falsely marketed or advertised, because it was not exactly a horror thriller, not much even of a thriller. It was more of a drama, I would say, because there are a couple of characters here that talk about their PTSD, and they go through things that happened to them, which I did think it was interesting. But I was coming to this book looking for a YA locked room murder mystery, and that is not exactly what I got. I really did enjoy the setting because there's something really cool about a locked almost abandoned shopping mall and having these teenagers inside unable to go out and unable to call for help. And so I enjoyed the premise and the atmosphere kind of the place, but it was not thrilling for me. There was no engagement in that regard. I felt like a lot of things were revealed too early. They were too obvious. So there was no mystery, nothing that was thrilling about it, because you already knew from the beginning kind of what was going on. And I thought that was really disappointing, because they could have played a lot more with you know, the mystery and trying to let the reader figure out what's going on and who could be possible suspects for this as the killer, instead of revealing so much from the very beginning. So even though you do see the teenagers trying to, you know, fight to survive inside of this locked building, and there are some cool kind of action moments, it was overall very underwhelming for me. And like I said, there was just no mystery, there was just no thrill, and you know, the horror was not enough for me to make me love this enough, I guess. So I don't know if I'm gonna try more things by the author. I might, because she has other like YA mystery thrillers, but this one was kind of a letdown. Next we have The Keeper by Sarah Langan, and this was the Evil Book Club pick, which is the book club that I host over at my Patreon. So we read this one all together, and this Sunday we will be discussing it also over at my Patreon. So if you read the book, you can still join and come to the reading sprints to talk about this on Sunday. And this was my first Sarah Langan book, and I have to say I was very impressed with her writing. This book is filled to the brim with different characters, and I think she managed to keep them apart, and she managed to infuse life to each and every single one of them and make them believable characters, which is really hard to do, especially when you have such a wide array of characters that all live in the same town. So the main premise of the book is that we are in this town that is kind of going into decline. Less and less people live there. A lot of people have moved out, and because of this, the mill has to close down. When the mill has to close down, people in this small town start to lose their minds. They start to get violent, and you as the reader start wondering what's going on with these people. I love how the story was presented, because you get like little tiny micro stories in every chapter, and it's very well divided in order for the reader to have enough time to get to know all the different characters little by little. And so the chapters are basically told from different perspectives, from different characters, and I found it quite easy to follow, and it made the reading experience a lot more engaging, because I was just changing POVs, but I could tell which character was which, and slowly but surely all of their little micro stories combine and you understand the big picture. The town is concerned about someone called Susan Marley, and people start to see her in their nightmares, and they all kind of prejudge her and are really harsh about her, and they all kind of blame her for everything that's going on, which is, you know, like, own your own mistakes. You should work on your accountability, people. And I was mesmerized by Susan's story. I really enjoyed to read about her and how things change for her so much in this book. She was one of my favorite characters, and people in town are basically treating her like a witch, and it's kind of like a witch hunt, you know. And I really enjoyed to see how everything developed, and obviously, when we're getting to the end, I was quite satisfied how everything wrapped up as well. So if you enjoy books that are a little bit different and books that have a lot of different characters, this reminded me in a way to Stephen King, because he has this kind of small town books with many characters, and then they all start to lose their minds or get violent. And so these had kind of like the same vibe for me. It has been the first book I have read by the author, which also happens to be her debut novel that has been re-released with Discover. And I think I will be reading more by her because I was really impressed with her writing. It's time to talk about As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson, which is the last book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy, and we have to address this book. I had heard mixed reviews about it before I started reading it, and now I understand why. When I started reading the book, I was still on board with it. I was like, I might enjoy this, but as we were getting to the end, I started to get angrier and angrier. And it's simply because I felt like Pip, by the end of this book, was not herself anymore. And that is something that, as a reader, when you fall in love with a character and as their story progresses, obviously they're gonna change, they're gonna mature, things happen to them, and that causes them to change, obviously. But it just felt like a complete different person, and it's not been that long since book one. And so, I don't know, I just felt like it was not the same Pip anymore to me, and the decisions the character made, the things that she said, they started to be so against the Pip that I knew that it was hard for me to believe it was the same character. In this book, basically, Pip feels like she has a stalker, and she starts investigating to try to figure out who is stalking her or who wants something from her. And it kind of follows the same pattern a little bit from book one and book two when it comes to the editing of the book. If you've never read the trilogy, I still do recommend you to read book one and two and just proceed cautiously into book three, because I do understand why so many people hated this book so much. I didn't hate it, but I have to admit that I was not happy with the ending, and I was not happy to see where Pip ended as a character. Apart from Pip here trying to investigate who is stalking her, there was a really cool kind of like true crime investigation about a serial killer, and I think that was my favorite part of the book. I still gave it a high rating because I do enjoy Holly's writing style. I did enjoy like 2/3 of the book, and the kind of investigation aspect, the serial killer true crime aspect, I was on board with it. It's just, I didn't hate it, I guess, like other people did, and I can understand why, you guys. I can understand why some of you hated it, trust me. But I think I was more disappointed than angry by the end of it, because I was not happy about the way that Pip's story ended. The Return by Rachel Harrison, and this was a book that I spontaneously decided I wanted to read because I had heard so many good things about the author, and I had been warned that her books are more of a thriller than a full-on horror, and that her books have kind of like a creepy element to it, but they're not full-on horror. And I was really curious to try, so I had The Return on my Kindle, and I read this one in like 2 days. The moment I started it, I was addicted to the author's writing. Is so good, and I can see why people are so into her books, because of the atmosphere that she creates and the creepiness around it. So even though the horror might be a little bit on the lower end, I feel like, you know, her writing does compensate for it. It might not be for everybody, you know, her writing style, but I found that it really worked for me. We follow a group of friends that is trying to rekindle their friendship. One of her friends disappeared for 2 years, and now she is back. They thought that she was dead. They even had like a funeral for her, like a service, because they had not heard from her in 2 years. There was like no clues on where she was, and now she's back. But she also doesn't really remember what happened to her, so they think it's just, you know, the PTSD from everything that happened. Everything has been suppressed, and maybe at some point she will let us know what happened once she remembers. So they decide, you know, to rekindle the friendship. They're gonna go to a nice hotel and spend a weekend together, talk and try to cheer her up now that she's back, because she seems to be a little bit off. So when they get to the hotel, they realize that their friend doesn't seem to be herself anymore. A lot of things about her seem weird and off, and they start to question if the same person came back or not. So this was a really interesting book. It almost reminded me in a way to my best friend's exorcism, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed to see, you know, more about the friendship of these women. It is about how we changed through the years, and there's a lot of like more like themes like infused into this creepy hotel with this creepy friend that has returned 2 years later. So I really enjoyed it. I'm not gonna tell you too much about it because I would like you to experience it for yourself and not spoil what it is all really about. But I really enjoyed it, so I'm definitely gonna be picking up more books by the author. Ghost House by Claire McNally, and you know, not too many thoughts about this book. We just follow a very basic premise of a haunted house, and we follow a family that move into a new house, into a new town, trying to rekindle the relationship together with their children. The wife has been unfaithful to the husband, so that's why they decide to move, start over, rekindle the relationship, and they take their kids with them to this new beautiful home. But then once they move in, they realize that there seems to be a presence living in there with them, and it might be trying to kill them. So I really enjoyed it personally. This is a book written in the 70s, but I still feel like even though it did, you know, it's one of those books that came out right after the Amityville Horror, and it was trying to be kind of that book, but I still feel like it was very satisfying for me. It might not be something completely new or fresh when it comes to that type of story, but I really enjoy the writing, and I'm definitely gonna be picking up the next book. It's time to talk about Bunny by Mona Awad, and I read this one for my Easter vlog, and I was so excited to get into this. I'm always so scared when many people recommend me the same book. I feel like there's some sort of pressure there for me to enjoy it. Even though I know that you guys are really kind to me when I don't enjoy books that you recommend me, but I have to say this one was definitely a hit for me. And this is one of those books where I cannot really tell you what the hell happened here. I cannot tell you the whole plot because I don't even know myself. I was confused for a chunk of the book, but I could not stop reading because the writing style was so mesmerizing and the atmosphere was so well achieved. I was just so immersed into this world, and I was so inside of Samantha's head that I just needed to keep reading. When I got to the end, I asked myself, what the fuck? But I still loved it. It's one of those weird experiences where you just don't know exactly what happened or how it got to the end. You don't even know if you like the ending, but you know that you love the book somehow. What I can tell you is that we follow Samantha, and she's starting at this new school, and there is this group of girls that are in the same class, and they are called the Bunnies, and she's always criticizing them. She thinks they're stupid, and then they decide to ask her to join the group, and she's like, of course I will. And so she joins the Bunnies, and she joins them also to participate in their art experiments, let's say, and everything starts to get really weird from then on. The things that I really liked about the book is that there are many aspects of it that I could see myself reflected. When it comes to Samantha, I could relate to her in many ways because it is that pressure of belonging to a group and, you know, to belong to the popular kids at school. It's also about the socially acceptable behaviors, and I don't know, I found that so fascinating and how people would change themselves just in order to fit in. I found everything very, very interesting. Like I said, when it comes to the actual plot, do I know exactly everything that happened? Hell no. But I loved it. So I hope this review makes sense. I really love to see Samantha's evolution from beginning to end. She started being, you know, besties with Ava, her friend, criticizing the Bunnies with her, but then the moment the Bunnies invited her to join, then she completely forgot about Ava, she pushed her away, and there's other characters where kind of the same thing happens, that Samantha's relationship with them changes as she joins the Bunnies. And very interesting book. It's definitely not for everybody. It's weird, it's bizarre, but the atmosphere, the writing style made up for it in my case, and I just really love to read Samantha's story. In the end, I would say that this book is Mean Girls meets David Cronenberg, because there's also some body horror in it and some really disgusting, questionable things happen. Next we have One Hell of a Night by Stephanie Sparks, and this is another book that takes you into a wild ride. If you read other books by Stephanie Sparks, you know what to expect from her. Normally there's a lot of physical violence, there's a lot of gore and blood, and you will also get that here. This story puts together a very unlikely pair in the middle of the United States in a very small town. We have a federal agent and a criminal that meet through a dating app and decide to have a date one night at a diner in a very small town in the middle of the US desert. They are supposed to be enemies, and in fact the date does not go really well, but something happens in that small town and they're gonna have to fight together in order to survive and make it out alive of there. The writing style was excellent, it was fast-paced, it was full of action. The story gets weirder and more disturbing as you go, so do check trigger warnings for this one. But if you've read other books by her and you enjoy them, you will love this one. I would say this is something similar to Samantha Kolesnik or even Eric LaRocca at times, so it's that kind of book. It is a true story of survival. It is such a wild ride, such a wild adventure, and it displays the darkest corners of the human mind. And yeah, I really recommend it to you guys, but keep in mind it is quite disturbing. It starts out quite okay and then it just takes a turn and there is no coming back from there, but I loved every bit of it. Next we are going to talk about the Bunnicula books. If you want to hear more in-depth thoughts about these, and also Bunny by Mona Awad, check my Easter vlog. But these books were a lot more fun than I anticipated. I decided to pick these books for my Easter vlog because bunnies, and I thought, you know, because these are for middle grade readers, that they were going to be maybe not exactly my cup of tea. But actually, I enjoyed them a lot more than I thought, and I was so invested. I also don't read many books that are told from the perspective of animals, and that was also so fun and refreshing for me. So basically, we follow a family that has a dog and a cat. So the dog is the one telling the story, but my favorite was, of course, the cat Chester. And the family decides to bring an abandoned bunny home with them, and the dog is really happy about it, but the cat is very suspicious and he thinks that this bunny might be a vampire. So that is what we have to find out in book one. Then I read Bunnicula Strikes Again, which was my favorite of the three, and in this one we learn a little bit more about Bunnicula's background, and we go back to the movie theater where the family found Bunnicula in the first place. And the last one that I read was Bunnicula Meets Edgar Allan Poe. This one, I guess, was my least favorite because I felt like it was a little bit less focused on Bunnicula and the cover was a little bit deceiving. It is more about the writer that kind of looks and sounds like Edgar Allan Poe, obviously. But I still really enjoyed it, and I think this was book 7. I think if you have kids at home or you want to get books for someone that has kids, this is a wonderful book series. I mean, I've only read 3, but I really enjoyed them. And they also have like illustrations inside, like here's Chester the cat, my favorite. So I would really recommend you guys to pick this if you have kids. And last but definitely not least, let's talk about a new favorite of mine, An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. Who would have thought? I mean, I really did enjoy A Dowry of Blood, and I didn't know if this one was gonna work for me because dark academia can really be a hit or a miss for me, but the mix between a sapphic love story, dark academia, and vampires did something for me. It did something for me. I think this might be now my favorite dark academia book, so here we are, me having a new favorite that it's a dark academia book. Vampirism is not the main element in the story, but is very important and relevant to everything that is happening. And especially towards the middle, there's a lot of things that happen that are a little bit more focused on vampirism, but I would say it's just one of the themes of the book, but it's not exactly a vampire book, if you know what I mean. It's more about the question of all questions. What would you be willing to do or give up for love? The book is told from two different perspectives. We follow Laura and we follow Carmilla, and they each tell us their story through their own chapters. And you know, it's one of those books where both POVs were something that I was really enjoying and I really loved. I know some books that are told from different POVs. I might be more interested in one POV than the other, but in this case, I love to hear from both girls. And I love that their kind of relationship started kind of like Carmilla being jealous of Laura because she's new in the school and she's now the teacher's pet because she's now the best poetry writer. And Camilla's jealous, but at the same time, she kind of, you know, cannot help to like Laura, and Laura likes Carmilla from the very beginning. So it's just so cute to hear their own stories. Laura is new at this prestigious school. She comes from, you know, not a rich family, so she is really excited to be in this school and she really excels in class. Camilla is wealthy after she inherited a lot of money, and she was always the teacher's favorite until Laura came. And so I just love to see the relationship change and bloom throughout the pages and everything that happened to them. The book does have a lot of trigger warnings, including a relationship between a teacher and a student. All the trigger warnings are at the very beginning of the book in case you need to check them out. But I don't have triggers when it comes to books, really, at least not so far. So I really did enjoy everything that happened in the book. And I even enjoyed, you know, the way that vampirism is portrayed in this book. There is also a lot more smut than I anticipated in this book. I was not ready for it. It just caught me off guard. I was like enjoying myself and, you know, dark academia vibes, vampirism, and I was like, ooh, smut. I was like, it just caught me off guard. Not that I regretted it, that it happened. I really enjoyed it, but it just caught me off guard. So just for you guys to know, there is smut in the book. This was such a good Carmilla retelling. It's a vampire sapphic love story in a dark academia setting. And I'm just so glad that I picked this one up and read it right away. I am gonna get everything else that this author publishes. I think her new book is coming out already in May, so I'm gonna need that baby. And yeah, I mean, even if you guys read A Diary of Blood and did not like it, give this one a chance, because I do feel like they're very different books, at least in my head, because I read A Diary of Blood when it came out, so it's been a little bit, but I did feel like a difference between the books, so maybe this one will work for you. And that, you guys, was everything that I managed to read in the month of March. I'm quite happy. I feel like only one or two things didn't work for me as much as I had hoped, but the rest are books that I really enjoyed, and I even found a new favorite, so I'm quite pleased with my reading month for the month of March. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video, and let me know down below what is the favorite thing that you read in the month of March. Let's talk about it in the comments, and I hope to see you all, as always, in our next coffee time. Bye!